Hi, welcome to the Catalyst Podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Burney. A catalyst is defined as a person or thing that precipitates an event. A catalyst is something that it participates in a reaction but does not get consumed in the reaction. There's a heart behind this podcast for, people with aspirations. There's a heart behind this podcast for motivated people that want to make a difference, that have a bias for action, that really truly want to be a catalyst in the environment around them, both professionally and personally, in their homes, in their workplace, and beyond. So welcome to this podcast. I really hope you're enjoying the series that we're in. Welcome to this episode, and let's dive right in. Wheels up. Welcome to the Catalyst Podcast. We are launching into the transformation series with Rachel Stander. I'm super excited to have her here. Before I turn it over to her for introductions, I did want to share that this is another great connection via Bob Seeger, and it's just been great to continue to build a similar network through LinkedIn and meet some great professionals, and just excited to jump into this conversation as we talk about transformation. I think that what Rachel has going on professionally will fit well into this series, and just excited to jump into this discussion. I want to allow you, Rachel, to kind of introduce the Scrap feature film, and certainly don't want to steal that thunder, but if you can, just kind of open up with a little bit about who you are, and then we'll get rolling.
Absolutely. So thank you for that, Hunter. I'm so happy to be here talking to you today. As you mentioned, I'm working on a feature film called Scrap. And my road to that has been a little windy, which sort of fits so wonderfully in this idea of transformation. I guess I would say, my path as a creative professional started in middle school, high school. I was a dancer. I started in dance. I did competition dance. How many times can you spin around before you fall out of it and do a kick? It was very much that. But it was, it was a great sort of way to meet people, and it was a good thing to keep me out of trouble after school, and and then it sort of grew into a more artistic pursuit in high school when I started seeing dance companies that would be touring. I grew up in Seattle area, and so we would get really wonderful companies from around the world. I remember the one that sort of felt like a lightning bolt was the Sydney Dance Company. I think that's what they're called, but for sure they're from Sydney. But it was like nothing I'd ever seen. It was something between ballet and Cirque du Soleil, and it was athletic and beautiful and artistic. And I was like, ooh, what is that? I want to head in that direction. And so I started, I learned about modern dance, and I joined a youth dance company in Seattle, and we worked with professional choreographers, and I actually went to college for dance, and loved it. And, it was great. And then shifts were happening, and I, sometimes things, whatever's going on in you is shifting, and you have to come to a point of recognition where the structure of your life is no longer in alignment with whatever's going on internally, and you have to change the structure to get back in alignment. And so for me, that was transferring schools in the middle of my junior year, moving from New York City to Los Angeles, and transitioning over into film and TV and acting. And I was an actor then for a decade. And, in a lot of ways, it was very similar to dance in that it was about sort of like connection and expression, and really about sort of like starting with the internal and like how does it manifest in relation to other people. But of course, there's words and and other people around when you're on set, so also very different. And then I started feeling like I wanted to have more agency, I guess, over what I was working on and what stories I was telling, and what the contribution was that I was making. And that put me on the path of producing, of being really thoughtful about the stories that I was telling and what impact they were having. I also I don't. Oh, this is terrible. I don't know his age. I have a niece and nephew. I think he's turning 5 this summer.
Okay, that's a fun age.
Maybe 4 or 5. I'm a terrible aunt, apparently. But when they came around, I really did start thinking of like, what is it going to be like for them in 10 years, 15 years? What is their adolescence going to be like in the world that we have created for them and the messages that we are filling their heads with? And I, in whatever small way, am participating in creating those messages. So how do I be more thoughtful about that and what effect it's going to have? So that is sort of the winding road that brought me to producing. So I've produced several things, short films and digital series, and Scrap is the first feature film I'm producing.
Okay.
It's also it's my first feature film. It's also the first sort of major project under the banner of my production company that I started, called A Season of Rain. Nice. And I was before we got on this call, I was thinking about that and this production company and what does it really even mean to have a production company? Because each project you form an LLC, and sort of everything is contained within that project's LLC. So business aspects are really sort of siloed out.
Independent, yeah.
Yeah, but the point of the production company is again, like, to have consciousness around what you're doing, to have a mandate for yourself about what kind of work do you want? If you're saying you want agency over your work, okay, what are you going to do with that agency? What is your focus going to be? So for me, I think that was a big part of why I wanted to set it up as a company for myself, so I could say, this is what I'm working on, and viewing opportunities through that lens. And
that's cool. Kind of a core focus.
Yeah. I think it's like very important, because otherwise you can get so overwhelmed with possibilities and opportunities and suggestions, and like, it's good to have a little touchstone to go back to and say, is this really like what I'm here for? Yeah.
No, I love that. I can relate to that. I started E3 Media Co. January 1 of 2020. And that was kind of a transitionary time for me, from a career standpoint and really from a home standpoint to some extent. I try to keep it simple. I'm a big believer in the power of 3. And so my mission with E3 Media Co. is enlighten, energize, and empower professionals. A lot of that roots from, early career and I'm still, I guess you would call it like mid-career. And so, I want to be able to kind of bring along and encourage people that, for the most part, are probably behind me. I mean, I think a lot of things that come up in conversations here are relevant for various points of people's career and really offline, if you want to call it that, and from like a personal standpoint. But the Catalyst podcast for me is kind of that first project. It's, I don't know how long I'll do this. I'm enjoying it, creating a great network. It's not anything that, at least at this moment, that it's like, hey, this is my retirement plan, right? Or anything like that. But I can totally relate, right? Because there are other things that I want to do. This was the most practical to start with. So I can totally relate to that. I appreciate you sharing that. You brought up agency, which is not something I've talked about much, but I love the concept, and I think that's a key word for professionals that really want to stand out and make a difference, whether it's you going off and doing your own thing or making a bigger impact within a team that you're on. Having agency, I mean, I don't know the exact dictionary definition, but I mean, to me, it's just having that it factor and having kind of an edge about you that, you're going to have all those entrepreneurial type characteristics and be able to endure and do something meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, right? Like agency, I brought that up in the context of, me sort of branching out on my own and doing this thing. But, you can have agency. I think you can have a sense of agency can like live inside of you, regardless of what is going on externally, regardless of what your circumstances are. If you can, I don't know, meditate or something.
Right.
I don't meditate myself, but I imagine you could sort of, you could do that. That would be something you could come to through meditation is, finding that sort of peace and sense of, to frame things as a choice makes decisions feel better. Even, even when there are things you don't want to do. And no matter how much power or control you have, there are still going to be things you have to do, right? You have to take out the trash. You have to brush your teeth. Like nobody's doing that for you. So, but yeah, it's as much a mindset as an objective truth, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great soundbite there. So I want to just kind of continue to tell the story. I think you did a great job. I appreciate you kind of walking us through the transition with your education. And, I think it's super interesting I think it takes a lot of awareness, honestly. It sounds like, New York to East Coast to West Coast, that's a big move. Can you just share a little bit about maybe the decision tree or just how you were able to land on making that decision and making that leap? Was it easy? Was it an overnight decision or was it something that was kind of a process?
I'm laughing because no, it was not easy.
Sure.
It did not come to me easily. Sort of the catalyst back to, what we're doing here. The catalyst of that for me, when I was in college in New York, in Manhattan, and it was my second year of college when 9/11 happened. And, obviously terrible time for the country, for the city, for lots of people. And it was, I don't know, it really just sort of made me think a lot about what am I doing? If things were to end tomorrow, would I feel like I had done everything I feel called to do, or at least, attempted to do everything I feel called to do with the time I have on earth in this body, whatever. And, ultimately I felt like, no, there's this thing that I've sort of been ignoring, but has been niggling away at the back of my brain for, I don't know, my whole life. Who knows? But I've ignored it. It wasn't practical. It wasn't, my mother didn't approve. My mother is not a fan of film or television and thinks movies are a gigantic waste of time. So God forbid I ever work in that field. But, at some point you just like, I just didn't want to find myself in a position to regret the way I had spent my time, or, squandered opportunity, the opportunity simply being like time on earth. If that's the opportunity, like make the most of it. But it was still, it was like a 6 to 9 month process. I started taking acting classes in New York. It's like, nice. Well, let me see how this goes before I like uproot everything.
Sure.
And it did not dissuade me. So then the next thing I realized was, if I had stayed there, if I'd stayed in New York at the school I was at, because I loved it. I loved the program I was in. I was really looking forward to writing my thesis. Like I was very happy there. I knew if I stayed, I wouldn't take the leap. So I sort of, forced myself off the edge of the cliff by moving across the country and to a school where I knew nobody. Yeah. And also, in the middle of, what was I then, junior year. So I was coming in the middle of a program, and like to the School of Theater, which, theater kids are a tight-knit bunch, I would say. They form fast friendships and pretty close knit. So it's hard to come in from the outside,
right,
when they're halfway through their sort of like, 4-year journey. But I found my way in. I found my friends. I found a way to sort of make that program work for me and do what I needed it to do, which was like give me sort of the base to explore and make sure I was like giving myself the chance I needed so that I wouldn't regret not having tried.
Thank you for being a part of this journey. Definitely subscribe and like. Check out Be a Catalyst on Instagram and on Twitter. Also, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel, where you'll find videos in addition to the Catalyst podcast recordings that give a little bit more context around my heart for training, my heart for seeing early to middle managers and first-time leaders really thrive and be a catalyst in the organization that they're in the project that they are after, everything that goes along with that. So thank you for being a part of this. Tune in for the next episode, and remember, be you, be confident, be a catalyst.